Hi, is this Barry?
Yep.
All right, well, let me do the official introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very excited to welcome our featured guest for the evening, actor and author of the brand new book, The Importance of Being Ernie. America grew up with him as Ernie from My Three Sons. We're very happy to welcome Barry Livingston to the show. You're on the air live with Terry and Tiffany. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Good to be here.
I am so honored to have you on, my friend. I mean, I grew up watching My Three Sons. It really was an iconic series. And I'm so glad that you're doing this book. I mean, how long did it take you to write it, and why did you just now come out with it?
Well, it took about a year to write, off and on. I kind of was in between some projects. I just had finished a film called The Social Network. And, I'd been working on some other really pretty nice projects in television, 2.5 Men and Mad Men, Big Love, NCIS, those kind of things. And, anyway, it dovetailed with the 50th anniversary of My Three Sons. It came on in 1960. And, I started working on it about a little over a year ago, I guess. All of those things kind of conspired to get me moving. I just thought, well, I'm in a great place right now, I felt, in my career, my life. And My Three Sons was, suddenly hit this half a century milestone. So, it seemed like a pretty, an amazing journey I've been on. And, from where I started to where I'm at today, it seemed like I might have a good book there. That's what got me going.
Well, a lot of people that play iconic characters like Ernie or like Adam West with Batman or whatever, I don't know how you feel about it, but a lot of them really get annoyed by the fact that they're known as that character, even though that character is so beloved. I mean, people just think they know you and they're a member of your family or whatever. How was it for you growing up once you stopped being Ernie to the point that I imagine you was always called Ernie or recognized like you're in a grocery store or whatever?
You're only human. I can sympathize with Adam West and these guys. Of course, I didn't run around in tights. So, that probably has something to do with it. You're an actor. That's the basic thing. That you get into this, you suddenly get into a role and it becomes iconic. And you're no longer just an actor anymore. You become this symbol to people. And sure, it has a great importance to people because it has a lot of sentimentality. Mm-hmm. You come into people's homes every week. They fall in love with a family like the Douglas family from My Three Sons and relate to them, and somehow it transfers into their own life of how to solve problems the way Steve Douglas would do it. So, it becomes so large. You can never quite live up to what people's expectations are for you. It's nice, but frankly, you're sort of elected to a role that you didn't really set out to be. This role model for people. It's just kind of thrust on you, and some people deal with it better than others. There was a time that I was longing to get past the stereotype of Ernie because I wanted to continue as an actor, and I'm sure that's how Adam West and some of these other guys felt. But at some point, I went, I can use this to my advantage. Ernie can be a good thing, and as it turned out, it's been an amazing introduction to some people who are huge fans that have been able to help me in my career recently. People like Adam Sandler, Matt Weiner, who was the creator of Mad Men. They were huge fans of the show growing up. So, in that sense, it was a good boost.
I always thought it was cool that, you were adopted in a show of My Three Sons. You started out as a neighbor, and they wound up, the Douglas family adopted you. But you got to work with your own brother, Stanley. How's Stanley doing?
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's still kind of writing and producing some things. That was very unique. It was, frankly, when he got on the show, he became, nationally famous from Chip. And I was working on another series called The Adventures of the Ozzie and Harriet. And yeah, you know, it was. I mean, I love my brother. I was happy for him, but you know, you can't help but go, wow, you know, that looks pretty nice where he's at right now. And I'm a brother. I wouldn't mind having a little of that same pie.
Right.
Strangely, and you know, enough that just the way it worked out, it was great. And you know, and had it not happened, that would have been fine too. I mean, you know, we're very close. We're close before My Three Sons, through My Three Sons, and we're very close as brothers today.
The thing about My Three Sons is the cast was so incredible. I mean, Fred McMurray and William Frawley and William Demarest and Beverly Garland later on. Who were some of the favorite people you worked with on the show, and was there anybody that you didn't quite like so much, if you want to tell?
There was a few grips and electricians I didn't like that are long gone. So
yeah,
I'm just kidding. No, you know, there were great. It was a great camaraderie, and there was you know, we were blessed with not having a whole lot of drama on our set. Fred McMurray was the main star, and he was a great guy to work with. I'd say my favorite guy that I had a chance to work with was probably William Frawley, who played Bub, because he was pretty much what you saw him. You know, he was Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy before Bub, and so, you know, I was real familiar with his character, and he was all gruff and, you know, full of himself, blustery guy, but, you know, at heart, he was a really softy, and he was a real sweet guy, and you know, and he used to, it would crack my brother and I up, is that the guy, you know, was totally uncensored, you know, anything, he didn't, you know, he held nothing back because we were minors, and that was, you know, when he let loose with a string of expletives that he, you know, messed up his lines or something like that, and out of frustration, you know, you just fall down on the floor with some of the stuff that he said, and I can't repeat it here, or we'll probably get thrown off the airwaves. But he was pretty, you know, he was pretty amazing guy. But I think of all the guys on the show, I liked him the best.
Well, we got a lot of great stories in the book, and we don't want to like give all that out because we got to get people to buy this book. It's one great book. But can you give us like a clue of maybe like one story? Didn't you have a situation with William Frawley to where weren't you guys filming next door to the I Love Lucy, not the I Love Lucy, but the Lucy show? And didn't he like send you over there to the set to mess with him or something?
Well, he and Vivian Vance had a long-running feud starting from I Love Lucy days. I don't know what was the start of that feud, but it was, see, you know, it was pretty real. There was tension between them, and it showed when they played husband and wife on I Love Lucy. I mean, and it was hysterical. It actually sort of worked for their relationship. But yeah, he knew that, you know, Vivian was working on Here's Lucy next door, and we'd go to lunch. We'd have you know, our usual hamburgers, and he'd have a cantaloupe and ice cream, and then he'd top it off with a couple of Cutty Sarks, and you know, and he'd be feeling no pain, and then he'd say, "Okay, boys, you know, today's the day," and because we've been collecting these big aluminum film cans, empty ones that they just, you know, have at the studio. So, you know, we'd go over to their sound stage. He'd hold open the door. He'd wait to hear, you know, cock his ear, listen to see if he heard Vivian's voice inside, and, you know, they'd be shooting a scene or rehearsing, and as soon as he heard his voice, he'd go, "Okay, throw them," and then we'd frisbee these giant film cans into their sound stage, and they would, I don't know what it would hit, but it just sounded like a bomb going off. And then he'd go, "Okay, come on, let's get the hell out of here. Come on, run, let's get in our," you know. And he would lead us away from the scene of the crime, and, you know, we'd have a good laugh. But yeah, we were his toadies, you know. We were doing his bidding for him, but it was funny. It was fun for us.
Wow, I'm surprised Lucille Ball didn't like grab you guys and put you guys over her knee.
She never caught us. After she caught us, we were too fast for her, I guess.
Wow, that's a great story. And man, you work with so many people like Jerry Lewis and Paul Newman. I mean, when you're that age, do you really realize who these people are that you're working with?
Yeah, definitely Jerry Lewis, because Jerry Lewis was, you know, every kid's favorite comedian in the early '60s. You know, he was the absent-minded professor, you know, the nutty professor. You know, Cinderfella. The film I did with him was called Errand Boy. You know, he was the Jim Carrey of that generation. So to get to work with him was you know, great. I mean, he was again, my recollections, which I've put down in the book, are of him as being quite a manic personality, off set. I mean, he just was very, very animated. And, you read the book, you can, there's a couple of choice little tidbits about Jerry in that.
Well, a lot of people, they mention, people that they always talk about, Jerry Lewis and Paul Newman, the big names. But somebody that I don't think gets mentioned enough, that you had a chance to work with and be directed by and rally around the Flag Boys, because I'm like a classic film comedy nut. Leo McCarey directed you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Leo McCarey screamed at me, basically. The story on that was really my very first job. I was about 5 years old, and I got cast as the son of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward in this film, Rallying Around the Flag Boys. And Leo McCarey was the director, went way back to the Marx Brothers, and he directed Duck Soup. But he was an old-time director. In those days, guys got away with a lot of things. If they didn't like what an actor was doing or some prop man messed up, oh man, they'd scream at you and, read you the riot act and sometimes get fired on the set. They sort of toned that kind of behavior down now. But in my case, I was instructed to look at a television, and that was the scene. My brother and I, Stan, was in that movie too. We were playing brothers in that. And I was told to just focus on the TV. When Paul Newman, who was playing my dad, comes in the door, don't pay him any attention. I just wanted to look right at that TV, And I went, oh, great, I ignore my parents all the time watching TV, so there's no problem. Anyway, as they started the scene, then McCarey would say, cut, Barry, you're not looking at the TV. You're looking over this way. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. I thought I was looking at the TV. We did that 2, 3, 4 more times where he'd start the scene and then he'd say cut and he'd come, running out and going, you're blowing the scene now. Come on, now pay attention. Come on, be a professional. And every time I kept thinking, I'm looking at the TV. I'd never looked at the television any harder in my entire life. At some point, even Paul Newman kind of was interceded. He said, hey, come on, lay off the kid now. He's just young, he's probably tired. And he said, let me, I got an idea here. So then, I'll get in the old TV cabinet kind of thing, and somebody gave him a puppet, and he said, I'll get his attention, and we'll get the shot. So anyway, again, as they did it, Paul Newman's in the TV thing, and he's kind of trying to wave at me with a puppet and do a little puppet show, and I'm looking at him, but as far as the camera was concerned, and McCarey, I still was looking off to the left and off to the right, and as it turned out, my eyes were just crossing, and somebody finally got concerned and said, we better call an ambulance and get him to a hospital, which is what they did. They took me there. They said he's got an astigmatism. The doctor said it's not serious. He just needs glasses. I came back to the set wearing glasses, and the producer took one look at me, and he said, we didn't hire him originally with glasses. We didn't really see Paul Newman's son wearing glasses. So I was promptly fired from my very, very first job.
Wow.
It was kind of weird. It was my first great part, and then it was ended in kind of an odd way that I was relieved of my part. I'm still in the movie. In the very, very first frame, I'm upside down because Joanne Woodward has me by my feet, and she's shaking me, mainly because, the story had I swallowed some coins. But when for the rest of the movie, it's another kid who's standing on his feet. That's the way Hollywood works.
So you were talking about stigmatism, so I take it that the glasses that Ernie wears is real. I mean, you really needed those glasses, right?
Well, from that point on, yeah, I really did. I was, I used them in just about everything, and I used them in real life. As I got into my later teens, I took them off mainly because I was in high school and didn't want to look all nerdy to the girls, so I took them off, and they actually improved. I mean, my vision really radically got better as I got into my later teens, and the eyes kind of straightened out a little bit. And yeah, it was just something I had to deal with. But it opened up that whole kind of prototype nerd look, because most of the kids that were working in that era were all like my brother. They were blonde hair, blue eyes, freckles on the nose, and I was more like put together by committee. I was, Mo Howard, bowl cut, big teeth, glasses.
Growing up as a teenager, I mean, how did you kind of deal with that stereotype? Because that was something that Terry had actually said. Well, I think really Ernie was like the first nerd, and he's like, I don't know if I should say that to Barry, but then in the press release we received from Harlan, kind of totes that. I mean, is that something that you had to learn to kind of embrace and love, or was it difficult?
Yeah, well, I mean, now it's become quite fashionable to be a nerd. I mean, you've got Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and all these guys. They're the rulers of the planet. So, you know, at the time, I mean, you were probably not referred to as a nerd. You were actually more of a geek. I didn't like that all that much. You know, I kind of fashioned myself as more of the Steve McQueen type.
Right.
But you know, as a kid, what are you going to do? You know, you play the hand that's dealt you, and you know, and it did certainly offer a lot of career. You know, it definitely was part of the Ernie image. And yeah, now you look back and you go, yeah, Ernie was pretty much a prototype nerd.
But you know the thing, I'm going to have supper with Jerry Mathers, who is the Beaver, next week. Jerry and you are two of the 60s TV stars that I can think of. You still kind of look like you did back then. I mean, you really haven't changed a whole lot. You think?
I think you must need glasses too. Do you? You know that I hear that. I hear that, and I go. People say, "My, you look just like you did." And I go, "Oh my God." I'm flattered, really, but you better take a closer look. I look a little different than I did then. But you know, Jerry, yeah, you know, Jerry's got all his hair. He looks like a big fat beaver now. I guess as opposed to a little tiny beaver.
So can I tell him next week you said that? Is that okay?
I don't really care. You can tell him whatever you want. Sure, go ahead and tell him I said he looks like a big fat beaver. That's what he says.
One thing I love about you, Barry, is you've got this great sense of humor. And I think it is so damn cool that you're like the killer in the new Hostel movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's going to be a change of pace for some people. And my kids, you know, I mean, I've been very lucky to be in some high-profile projects, like, you know, You Don't Mess with the Zohan with Adam Sandler, and First Daughter with Michael Keaton, Katie Holmes. The Social Network just finished a film with Ben Affleck called Argo, which will be out next year. But Hostel 3 ranks the highest in terms of prestige with my children. You know, I mean, quite frankly, it's a horror film. You know, it's a scary, scary movie. And I play one of the, you know, the insane killers in it. And as an actor, great. You know, I love doing different kind of things. But it is funny that, you know, films that win Oscars, they're okay. But if you're in Hostel 3, yeah, that's big news. Something the kids want to post on Facebook, you know, that my dad, one of the killers in Hostel 3.
Well, we know Eli Roth, and it would only be Eli Roth that would cast somebody that was Ernie in House. It's perfect. I think it's perfect casting.
It's brilliant casting.
And you, seriously, I saw some footage. You are so good.
I hope he cast Barry when he cast me in that, and not necessarily cast me as Ernie. But maybe that was in the back of his head. I don't know. I really don't know. I didn't even meet Eli Roth. He wasn't involved in this production much. It was a guy named Scotty Spiegel, who was one of the original creators of the series, and he's directing and wrote this episode. So you'll have to ask him. I don't know.
Well, I think it was perfect casting. Now, if he would have cast Danny Bonaducci, I wouldn't be so shocked, because you would think maybe he could off somebody if he got mad. But I don't know. But I think it's excellent casting.
You know, again, I don't think you're going to immediately, hopefully, as I'll do my job as an actor, and you're not going to be looking at me as like Ernie doing this thing.
That's sure.
Yeah, if I did, I didn't do my job well. You know, if you're sitting there, you know, waiting for Fred McMurray to walk in, I probably really screwed the whole movie up. But hopefully I'm a better actor than that.
Well, you kind of came from a showbiz family. Is it true that your mother, and I say this with deep respect, was a fan dancer?
Yes, she was. I mean, I you know, how many, you know, kids can look at your parents and talk about them, and yes, my mother was a fan dancer, which was in the great tradition of Gypsy Rose Lee, the stripper. Yeah, she worked at the theater that my father owned, and yeah, it was pretty tame in those days. It was you dance around with some boa feathers, and somebody beats a drum, and you flash a little skin, and you know, they're wearing a bathing suit or something underneath it. So, but you know, in its era, it was pretty scandalous. I mean, it was probably akin to being a pole dancer today. You know, I don't know, but it makes for interesting conversation for sure.
Well, the typical stock question, and I just have to ask it because, like everybody that interviews somebody that was a past, TV kid star, why do you think you didn't really fall through some of the pitfalls? Because, a lot of people say, oh, child stars, they're always on drugs and blah, 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 and everything, which I don't think it's everybody. I think that's just a myth. But you really were successful, and you worked constantly, and you haven't really seemed to have any of the problems. What do you, atone that to?
Good genes, I guess, to start with. Who knows? I had my period of my lost weekend as well, and I wrote about it in the book, and it's part of my life, who I was. I didn't, even if I was being self-destructive to myself, I sort of, had a handle on it, but I was self-destructive as most people in the 20s are. You're floundering. In my case, I was dealing with the fact that the fame part of my life had certainly been gone, way in the other direction. And it's okay. I never really got off on being that famous anyway. I never had a posse and never knew how to sort of take advantage of it to meet girls anyway. So,
right.
So it went away, and I was probably happier for it, only that, I knew I wanted to be an actor, and I just got focused on that and studied with some very good teachers, people like Martin Landau and I think Jack Garfine, and so I took it serious. I don't know how, some other people that I see who have kind of had so many problems. I don't know them personally. I don't know what their other, what happens in their personal lives that drove them to such, truly tragic ends. I just, unless you're that person or hanging out with them, I just see everything like everyone else does in the tabloids, and those are not the most reliable sources, but it's it's a shame to see some people who maybe I think they wanted to continue on, but perhaps didn't put the time or the effort into bettering themselves as an actor. And I went to New York and worked off Broadway, and I worked on Broadway, and I really tried to hone my craft, and felt that was going to be important to me in the long run, and I think it's hopefully paid off.
Well, maybe you can tell people a little bit about your book now. You've told some stories and stuff, but does it have photos in the book? I mean, how many pages is it, and what can people expect when they buy this book?
Well, I think, you'll be surprised that it's funny. I mean, I keep hearing that over and over, and I think I'm a pretty good writer. I mean, all humility aside, I think I can weave a tale pretty well, and did it with humor. There's a lot of great photos in the book. Some of me and Lucille Ball and Ozzie and Harriet and stuff from My Three Sons. There's a very creepy picture of me from Hostel 3 in it. And I think there's great stories. Myrna Loy. I did a movie with her. Took a limo ride with Elvis Presley once. There's stories about Robert Downey Jr. working on Zodiac recently, Brad Pitt, my time working on Social Network and the great director David Fincher. So, it spans 50 years, and if anyone loves the old television series of the 60s and, the people that were great stars of yesteryear, the people that I work with Jackie Gleason and Jerry Lewis and Debbie Reynolds, there's stories galore about them. And again, I'm honest about my personal life, about what it took for me to get back on track and get my career into credible shape again, and to become a hireable commodity in Hollywood. So, hopefully people will pick it up and read it. I hope they will.
There's such a difference between people from your generation and people that are in TV shows today, such as Jersey Shore and everything. And that is, you guys are so real and so down to earth,
Well, those are, I don't watch those shows other than just kind of casually glancing at it here and there, and I can't say I've ever watched a complete episode of Jersey Shore. I've watched Storage Wars. I've looked on Storage Wars and Pawn Stars, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've watched probably.
Me too.
And my guilty pleasure is watching The World's Dumbest, and it gives me, one of the few shows that really makes me laugh. But yeah, you see celebrities today, or people they call celebrities, the people from Jersey Shore, or the Biggest Loser, The Bachelor, and I go, I don't get it. I don't know how people get hung up. To me, I just don't get hooked in those. I just don't get hooked into the storylines or care about what's going to happen with Snooki or the situation or
right.
what's and I don't know. I just I'm just from a different generation, so it just goes completely over my head. So those are not, I would say those are reality shows too. The shows that we did, obviously were much more scripted and
right.
more of a traditional kind of situation comedies.
Well, as we end here, I always end with a crazy question. And this is for comedy, by the way, Barry. You hear like the book, from the Brady Bunch, Greg Brady had his crush on Florence Henderson. I don't know if any of that was going on with you, but of the women that was in your series, Beverly Garland and your TV brother's wife, I believe her name was Tina Cole.
Tina Cole, yeah.
Yeah, and we got to remember Dodie. Okay, which one of those did you possibly have a crush on, and which one would you like to have dated?
Okay. Dodie was a little too young. I wasn't into that real creepy, like, young. I wasn't into really sleeping with my mother. But that brother, the brother and his wife, Tina Cole, I'm just like Jimmy Carter. I have to say, as a teenager, I certainly lusted in my mind after Sweet Katie. She was quite an attractive, quite an attractive king cousin. Yes, she was a focus of my affections in my mind quite a bit. So yes, that to answer your question, that would be it, Katie.
Well, we encourage all of our listeners to head over to the website, theimportanceofbeingernie.com, to check out the book. Is there a way, I don't know if they order through that website, if it goes directly through you, but our listeners are wanting to know, is there a way that they can get an autographed copy of the book if they buy it from a certain area?
Well, I just did some book signings here in Los Angeles where I live. That's really, unless I start going around the country and doing more book signings, that's really the only practical way that I can get out there and sign it. It's just not practical to have books come here and you sign them and be running to the post office. I would love to do that. Honestly, my time in terms of what I do with my day in terms of acting and auditioning and taking care of all the other things I have to do, I really am not able to do that.
Right.
Maybe at some point in the future, but at the moment, the best way to get the book is to get it through Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, which is bn.com, or you can go to a Barnes & Noble bookstore. And then look out, I post on Facebook. I'm on Facebook sometimes, and if I'm going to do a book signing around the country, just depends where it is. If you're, and I'm coming to your town, absolutely bring the book by, and I'd be happy to sign it.
Fabulous. Well, we want to thank you so much, Barry, for joining us on the air, and we wish you all the best luck with all your current and future projects. I know Argo is getting a lot of kind of buzz, so good luck with that as well. And it was a pleasure talking with you tonight.
Yeah, I'll be coming up in an episode of Suburgatory, too, an ABC series that's coming up. I think it'll be
Great. I got to say, though, I'm really looking forward to Hostel 3. Because
Hostel 3. Strangely enough, my book editor, who you think this is, got to be a very brainy, literary type, when he heard I was in Hostel 3, too, he practically, I think that sealed the deal to buy the book, because he was a huge fan of Hostel 3. I thought, well, that's great, he's not just like reading Tolstoy and things like that. He's waiting for the next screamer slasher movie to come out. So,
Barry, it's kind of a good move because of course, there's the fan group of the baby boomers that know you for My Three Sons, but the horror movie fan crowd is huge, and they're fanatics, and they will follow you everywhere, which is good or bad.
Yeah, I when I accepted doing this, I'm pretty crafty, I guess, and that accounts for how I survived. And I went, this is a younger generation. That's what they like. I want younger fans. I don't want to just have a bunch of old geezers sitting around reading AARP that are, fans from 50 years ago. They're more than welcome to be my fans too, but I want to renew my membership in, with the next generation. And that, I thought the kids love that. I know my kids were all excited about it, so that's a good thing. And Quentin Tarantino is the executive producer of that. That can't hurt, being in a movie that he's involved in. So, there was a lot of reasons to do it, and it sounded like a fun, different role. So we'll see. We'll see where it leads.
I think the reason that you survived and you're so, working so much and everything, and especially with, living with Ernie always around you and everything, you got this great sense of humor about things, I really think that's true. And the way that you are in Hostel 3, I think the reason you're so good at being scary was because you were around Uncle Charlie so much.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm actually channeling William Frawley when I'm removing somebody's face. Really thinking I'm removing Vivian Vance's face. That's exactly what was going through my mind. Was Frawley finally getting my revenge on her?
Well, it's been great, and give our love to your brother, and I must say you certainly have been my favorite character in My Three Sons, and I've watched a lot of the other things you've done, and great success in the future, Barry.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great night, Barry.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.